All right. Today, I have a special guest to help me go through some of the biggest stories in the news, Dr. Simone Gold. Dr. Gold, thank you for joining me again.
Thanks. It's great to be here, Stephen.
So, lots going on with information about President Biden, accusations against his cancer, his mental health, big moves that RFK Jr. and Trump are making. I want to go through all of that. Let me just give my audience some background. Dr. Simone Gold is a doctor, a lawyer, a public speaker, and an author. Is there anything else that you do? My gosh, these are like all of the best things you could check off on somebody.
That's funny. Yeah, my parents should be happy. Yeah.
Oh yes, well, there's that joke about becoming a doctor and having purpose and all that. So I want to get your thoughts on this. Senator Ron Johnson said that he believes Jill Biden should be investigated for elder abuse and the cover up of her husband, Joe Biden, the sitting president, his mental decline. As a doctor and lawyer, any thoughts on that?
I don't disagree. I mean, obviously, and I love Senator Johnson. It seems to me, though, that the people that are on the payroll of the United States government are the people that are most responsible. Obviously, the man was in decline. We all saw that for years. But tell me his chief of staff didn't know. Tell me that all of his staff, right? As far as I know, she doesn't actually draw a budget, a salary from the federal government. So yes, but right, shouldn't the blame go where it belongs, to the people that we've hired to look at these things?
Yeah, it seems like they were pretty good at turning a blind eye. Obviously, when you talk about politics, there's this desire for power, and I think they just wanted to stay in power. And if you have an auto pen that can sign billions of dollars out to friends, it can sign pardons. What do you need a president with a mental capability?
And I definitely don't want to be flippant about what Senator Johnson said. He may know or suspect that she was the first person in the room and the last person to leave the room when big decisions were being made, and she was stepping in as a government worker, right? Was she there when the auto pen was being used? Was she directing its use? Certainly that's absolutely possible. And he may know more than I do. And at any rate, she should be investigated. But I also think people that were on the government payroll who were being paid, I mean, there's a vice president, obviously. There's the chief of staff, and there's so many people that knew what was going on.
Yeah. I, for one, I would like to get to the bottom of it. You've been talking about it. I've been talking about it. So to have somebody that has subpoena authority say, yeah, we want to get some answers on that, it's encouraging to me. I want to get your thoughts on this. You've been studying the COVID shot, mRNA technology. There's this new word, turbo cancer. And it's being used, especially where you can find truth, like on X and other places, where this is becoming a major problem. Even Dr. Patrick Soon Shiong, who owns the LA Times, he said to Tucker Carlson, listen, without examining and looking at the medical, I couldn't tell you, but this was either not looked at for over a decade, or he's got turbo cancer from getting COVID twice and 5 or 6 booster shots. Any thoughts on this story as it came out?
Yeah, it's really curious. I had read somewhere that he had not had his PSA level checked since 2014, which may be true. If it's true, it's unbelievable malpractice on the part of the White House physician. It's just not done in older men. There you go. But I have a feeling maybe they didn't check. Maybe they didn't want to see it. For sure, I think the cancer was accelerated by getting a number of vaccine, I shouldn't even say the word vaccine, booster shots. These shots and then repeated booster shots are very destructive to the immune system. Just want to remind everybody that the main reason humans don't have cancer all the time everywhere is because our immune system all the time is surveilling our body for signs of aberrant cells. So when our body's immune system finds a few abnormal cells, it can get rid of it. Cancer develops when a lot of cells escape detection. How does that happen? If your immune surveillance system is not working well. So we absolutely could have seen it in Biden's case, and we're certainly going to see it over the years and decades to come, which is a tragedy.
So you've been in medical practice for a long time. MSNBC had the gall to invite a medical doctor on that said they probably didn't check the president for an 11-year period because testing is expensive. A PSA test for someone without insurance is only $80. How could the sitting president of the United States not get an $80 test?
I thank God never heard that. That is insane. That there's a doctor that went on a news show that said he wouldn't get the test or didn't get it because of the cost is unthinkable. First of all, like you said, it's not an expensive test in the scheme of things. Second of all, the president of the United States gets every single thing that the president of the United States needs. We have Air Force One, for God's sakes. We have security, Secret Service. Are you kidding? The children get Secret Service, let alone the president. That's absurd and ridiculous. And you know what? I think we're all getting sick and tired of the liars. I don't think any American could have heard that and believed that doctor ever again. That's crazy.
Yeah, Hunter Biden's living in a $20,000 a month Malibu house surrounded by Secret Service paid for by the taxpayer, and they can't run an $80 test on an 80-year-old man to say, hey, what does your prostate look like from a blood perspective? It's just like, it's one of the dumbest things I've ever heard on the news.
I'm going to have to go find that clip. Thank you for pointing it out to me. That is so hilariously absurd that I just think that person revealed themselves to just be such a liar. Such a lie. That is a complete lie.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, sticking with this theme, your thoughts on RFK Jr. canceling this $700 million plus contract with Moderna, one of the main mRNA shots, saying, listen, we've looked into this. We don't feel comfortable with this. It didn't go well for the human body. Why are we now going to inject hundreds of millions of chickens with this new technology? What are your thoughts on him canceling that and the mRNA technology?
I am so grateful that Kennedy is in that position. It's amazing. I want to remind people that Moderna had 11 years, 44 straight quarters of economic losses since it was launched as a business through 2020. 44 straight quarters of economic losses. And then in the spring or the fall of 2020, or maybe it's 21, for the first time became profitable ever. That's all you need to know. They're banking their entire business on these COVID shots, which are terrible. They're not safe. They're not effective, et cetera. So you know what? I hope they go bankrupt. And, perhaps I will interfere with Fauci's hiatus vacation in Italy, which is where I hear he is. We should be so grateful that Kennedy's in the spot, that he understands this and that he's doing something about it.
Okay, so let me just clarify, Dr. Gold. You're telling me an experimental technology was tested on the American people by an experimental company that had had they brought any other drugs to market that were successful?
No, they did not. I don't know what they had done, but they were working on this platform for years, and they had 44 straight losses, financial losses. They filed paperwork with the SEC. That's how I came to see it. I reviewed it at the end of 2020, December 2020, and they had 44 straight losses of quarter. And the first time they became profitable was when the COVID shot was released or about to be released. I don't remember if it was late 2020 or early 21, but that's incredible, isn't it? That's why I share that information with you.
Yeah, that is like, I didn't get it. I mean, when I saw Pfizer, Johnson & Johnson, okay, these companies have been around and they've got some questionable things in their past. But when I saw Moderna had literally never, I was like, why would the government give hundreds of billions of dollars to a company that has no track record? It made no sense.
But their name is a play on the mRNA. Like, that's what they've banked their whole economic model on, is the mRNA. That's where the word Moderna came from. It's mRNA basically in their name.
Oh.
But it's there you go. It's a deficient platform, so investors were banking on it. That's fine. That's how life goes. That's how business goes. How the FDA released this garbage and poison on the American people is shocking. And basically, I hope they go under. I want to say, not in their defense, but Big Pharma has the biggest financial penalties assessed by the federal government of any industry. So Johnson & Johnson has had its share of multi-billion-dollar penalties it's had to pay out. But like you said, they've also done a lot of good products. Moderna really hasn't done any, as far as I know.
Yeah, that's the thing is like I'm pretty hard on big pharma, but I also will admit, like I believe I'm alive because of modern medicine, modern surgeries, understanding science, things like that. So I'm not looking to put them under, but at the same time, if you knowingly gave shots to pregnant women, knowing it was aborting babies, infiltrating placentas, milk, that it was, harming children, that it was giving heart issues to men, and then you still put it out because you wanted to make money, that's the criminal activity I want to see someone be held accountable for.
And I just want to I want to broaden this a little bit for our viewers. So one of the, capitalism gets a bad rap, and there's certainly obviously problems with capitalism like there are with all systems, but it's still your best hope is kind of a free market, because if something isn't good or it's too expensive for what it is, people simply don't buy it. Moderna would absolutely be out of business if it wasn't being propped up by government contracts. People are not going to go out and buy this Moderna shot. So look at it that way. It's just not being given a government contract. It's going to have to compete. If it's got great ideas, if it's got some mRNA technology, has great ideas and great products, then people will come and buy it. But it's been propped up by our federal government, and I'm sorry, I don't want to say scam, but it's close to a scam. And I'm so happy that Secretary Kennedy has done something about it.
Amen. Yeah, whatever the next closest word to scam is, that's what was perpetrated on us. I've been watching RFK Jr. Curiously, and I have to imagine it's very hard to come in and say, hey, we're going to yank this out or yank that out because there's so much money. But I'm seeing him going, okay, Moderna and Pfizer, you guys can keep this product and compete, but you got to be transparent that it damages your heart. Same thing with children. Hey, we've reviewed the data. Top scientists and doctors have reviewed the data. There's no empirical evidence that this is good for children or necessary for children. Do you feel like he's kind of like a Jenga thing, pulling out the pieces until they make a move on their own to either pull it, or where do you think we're going?
I want to start with, I'm in your camp. I think Big Pharma doesn't have to be the enemy. I think they've been incentivized improperly in many instances, and we taxpayers and our representatives need to incentivize Big Pharma to work towards the light and towards the good. So I never expected Kennedy to go in there with a sledgehammer and try to destroy Big Pharma. That doesn't make any sense, right? Big Pharma and big medicine has done a lot of good in the world. So I think I know the man. I think he's doing exactly what I would expect him. He's very intelligent. He's going in with a certain degree of precision in areas that he knows well. He knows the vaccine industry very, very well. He knows that the vaccine manufacturers are shielded from liability, and he doesn't necessarily think that makes them evil, but he thinks it gives them a financial incentive to not make the most careful, best product that they could. So I think he's going in with that approach. What can we do as a big purchaser, which the government is, to make the products as safe as possible? So everything he's done is consistent with I know him to be. People who are disappointed that he hasn't done more, people very strongly in Maha, for example, like, I can't believe he didn't come in and just trash the measles shot. If you read his words, he opened up most people's understanding of it. He said that vitamin A was very important. He reminded people it's not such a bad disease. He said you could take the shot if you want to take it, but you have to think about if you really need to take it. So I think he's opening up the dialogue and bringing less dishonesty, less corruption. And I hope he lands in a place that gives maximum freedom to people. And I think he's working towards that.
Yeah, I was a little bit confused on that too. And then I went to ChatGPT and I said, what connection does vitamin A have to the measles? And it's like, well, it's the first thing it depletes the body of. And you need that. It helps fight back. And I was, oh, okay, duh, this makes a lot more sense. But there's not a lot of money in selling vitamin A,
You can't,
So
I think it would be you and I know what we know. The smartest doctors in this space know a lot, but the best educated doctors in this space are so far ahead of the citizenry on this issue. The average citizen probably believes the MMR is really important to them, right? So I don't think it's politically sensible to go out and attack like that. I think it's better to provide information and to provide choice and to withdraw government propping them up, right? Which he does when he withdraws a vaccine from the childhood vaccine schedule. He's hit their bottom line in terms of sales. So I think that's his approach.
Yeah. Okay. This next question's a little long, so just bear with me. But last week, President Trump made statements about challenging the pharmaceutical industry's influence. In a speech, he described Big Pharma as the most powerful lobby in the world, saying that it has tremendous power over the Senate, the House, and even governors. He said, for that reason, I have to break the system. But he's also not calling for Big Pharma to be completely destroyed. What do you think he means by that? Maybe don't let the lobbyists infiltrate members of Congress? What do you think he meant by that? Losing weight can feel like an uphill battle, especially with the American diet. From nasty seed oils that hurt us to high fructose corn syrup that actually makes us more hungry. Americans have wrecked their gut health. This is where ThermoTrim steps in as a smart, science-backed solution. This USA-made fat burner starts by restoring your gut health. ThermoTrim has a gut bacteria found in thinner people, but not heavier Americans. ThermoTrim helps restore that so you can lose weight. It supports digestion and curbs cravings naturally. Have you tried other products to lose weight and change your health? I have. ThermoTrim is what my body needed. Get ThermoTrim to improve your gut health and start losing weight today. Visit redlineremedies.com or snap the QR code. Make sure to use code Gardner to get an additional 20% off today. We all feel better when we lose weight, and I want you to live a long and happy life.
I think he stole my speeches from the last several years. I've said for a long time that Big Pharma is controlling the federal government, not the other way around. It's actually pretty straightforward. If you look at pretty much, I think over 95 or 98% of representatives are on both sides are getting a lot of money from Big Pharma. That's what he's talking about. In other words, running a congressional race, running a Senate race is really expensive. They rely on donations and PACs and all of that. So Big Pharma donates to both sides. It's a really difficult problem. I mean, Big Pharma is just pursuing its own bottom line. That makes sense. But, you know, we have a system where you have to run for office every 2 years or every 6 years, and they have to raise money, and it's really expensive. And so they're taking donations. They were, you know, and by the way, Matt Gaetz, who didn't take any of that kind of money, is no longer in Congress. Like, it's extremely difficult to run for Congress without pharmaceutical money. But there's other ways that you can go about it. And I think what Trump did, I didn't even think of his plan. Like, that's credit to him, to cut the prices a lot, which means they'll have less money to give to candidates. I assume that's what he was talking about. He's trying to think outside the box because, again, Big Pharma, I agree with him, essentially runs the federal government.
Yeah, when one of the first things that RFK Jr. talked about that really made sense to me was he talked about this idea of corporate capture, where, as you mentioned, Big Pharma, they get a lot of money from the government, but they've now infiltrated it almost like cancer, right? Where it's like, okay, hey, listen, we need you to give us more money for this, but then it ends up like they're doing very well on Wall Street because of government money, right? And they've been able to infiltrate. What are your thoughts on the idea of corporate capture when it comes to chemical, Big Pharma, and big food?
Yeah, I mean, you're making an excellent point. It is true that Big Pharma donates a lot to politicians, but our taxpayer dollars are funding most of the research that then the big pharma corporations profit off of. This is one of the things, I wasn't paying real attention to this, prior to COVID, but I learned watching the COVID that a lot of the research like Moderna and Pfizer was being paid for by the taxpayer, but the profit from the sales of the Pfizer and Moderna shots were not being shared with the taxpayer. I can't believe that that's legal. I'm just amazed that that's legal. That I can understand the government choosing to go in as like an investor, for example, but then when the investment pays off and is profitable, why are you not returning a percent back to the investor, right? That's how it would work in the real world. So you can see the corrupt, it's really difficult. And Robert Kennedy's book, The Real Anthony Fauci, talks about and explains the regulatory capture incredibly well. You're talking about private companies, but also the fact that our agencies are captured. Basically, the FDA, as an example, FDA executives, when they leave their government position, typically go out and work for Big Pharma. So FDA executives know that when they leave, they're going to be offered a job by Pfizer or Moderna. For example, the FDA Commissioner Hahn, who was in charge at the time Pfizer and Moderna were being approved, went off when he left the FDA. He became the money guy, the CFO or the CM, chief operating officer, something like that, or the CEO, I think, of the finance arm of Moderna. So the FDA chief goes and works for the money arm of Moderna. And that's just normal. That's business as usual. That's why it's really, really challenging. At the same time, as a doctor, obviously I believe in good medicines. I just want them to be as safe as possible. And I never want the government to come in between the doctor and the patient again.
Yeah. Yeah. They call that the revolving door, where you have like a general who leaves the military and goes to like Raytheon or Northrop Grumman or something, and then they come back into government, and those companies seem to keep getting bigger and bigger contracts with taxpayer money. So it ends up being a revolving door. I recently had Mike Howell. He's the president of the Oversight Project. They do hundreds of lawsuits against the government. I was asking him about Dr. Fauci because he's got a bad taste in his mouth for Fauci, just like me, just like you. And I asked him, what are your thoughts on these pardons that they're now saying may not be done correctly because it was an auto pen? Biden wasn't really around. Did he even know anything? And he said that there are groups of lawyers right now that are looking at, could we take Fauci and individually sue him and get the courts to decide whether these pardons are valid or not? So not as a group, but just single him out individually and make him go into court and prove all of this. Would you like to see something like that?
I don't have any faith in the judicial system anymore is the problem. The auto pen is a huge problem. It's a huge problem for the freedom of the American people. You cannot have such a thing. If we all read that this was all happening in some tribal third world nation, we go, oh yeah, well, that's what happens over there. It's unbelievable that happened. And I'd love to get to the bottom of it for our own freedom's sake. I don't have faith in our judiciary right now. I think we're headed to a bit of a collision between the judiciary and the executive. And when you go back to the Constitution, it's the president that's in charge. Okay, it's not the judges that are in charge, not at all. And in fact, Thomas Jefferson warned us about an unchecked judiciary. He was quite worried about the judiciary's power. So I don't know that I have so much faith. One thing that we can do for Fauci, and I'd heard a little talk about, was that a state, right? He only gets an auto pen pardon from the federal crimes, but there were governors, for example, and state attorney generals or state solicitor generals who could bring a charge against Fauci for interfering with their citizens. So that's always an option open to each state.
Yeah, well, like Missouri went after Pfizer for misleading the public through marketing. I'm shocked that like Idaho or Utah or Missouri, one of these conservative states that was against Fauci, I'm surprised that they haven't launched an investigation. Maybe they will, but I don't know. It's like he got to head off to Italy and have no consequences or repercussions. It seems odd to me.
I hope, honestly, and I know we'll get to it, we don't have to jump in line, but the chapter in my book, Selective Persecution, which is on Amazon, the chapter on COVID, I do a very deep dive into Fauci with all kinds of new information that I think even you don't know. The parallels between what he did in his career, early in his career with AIDS, when he was first leading what would be the NIH. I think he was at NIAID at that point, but he was kind of new and young. And he's the one who blocked a lot of treatment for gay men, and gay men hated him. And if you go back on Google or YouTube right now, you can find tons of pictures and video evidence of them picketing against Fauci, saying that Fauci was killing them. All of that got buried during COVID. But in my book, I described exactly his MO. It was exactly the same as what he did during AIDS. For example, you're old enough to remember that people were very afraid of gay people. People didn't want to talk to gay people or touch them because it was Fauci. Fauci gave the impression that AIDS could be casually transmitted. So people got very afraid of gay people. That was the old-fashioned version of what became 6-foot social distancing. He should have known in both cases it was not like easy or lethal. He also restricted access to a cheap, safe, generic, life-saving medication. Back in the 80s and 90s, that was Bactrim, the sulfa antibiotic, and he restricted access to it for the disease that killed the AIDS patients, which was pneumocystis carinii pneumonia. Fast forward to COVID, and he restricted access to cheap, safe, generic medicine that was life-saving, hydroxychloroquine, and later ivermectin. Why did he restrict access to these cheap, safe medicines? Brings us to his modus operandi number 3. He wanted to pursue a vaccine. He wanted to be like famous or well-known or make money or whatever it was, his ego. He was working on an AIDS vaccine, you will remember, for 25 years. After like 9 years or so, when the AIDS vaccine never materialized, he finally relented on the cheap, safe, generic med. Fast forward to COVID. He was working on the vaccine. He wanted that vaccine to come out and and he restricted access to hydroxychloroquine. If we had had access to hydroxychloroquine, if the government acknowledged that hydroxychloroquine worked, they would never have been able to rush out the vaccine. I lay this all out. It's utterly fascinating that he did the same thing then that he's doing now. And people don't know this because the media didn't report on it. I remembered it because I was a young doctor, and I remember the pickets and the protests against Fauci, but the media never reported it.
Yeah, so I don't remember that side, but I remember being a young man, and I remember in school, like, hey, don't touch people's spits, don't touch people's bodily fluids, be careful of like you could get AIDS very, very quickly. If you encounter any gay people, keep your distance. Like that I remember as a young child. So when you're saying that, I'm like, oh my gosh, these are like things I remember from elementary school 35 years ago. Gosh, what an evil, wicked person. I can't believe he ran the same playbook again.
Playbook. I spelled it all out. And it's like such an amazing story that I've never heard anybody report this on the media. So I lay it all out. It's in chapter 6, which is the COVID chapter. I put all the COVID stuff in one chapter because some people really just want to know like the whole COVID story. It's all there. And Anthony Fauci has so much blood on his hands, like honestly, probably more than Stalin. I mean, I'm just not joking.
Yeah. No, you said something that my own brain just was like, oh, wait a minute. I never thought, so like, I thought he was trying to railroad people into giving money to Pfizer and Moderna. Like it was a financial play. Maybe he would be on the board later or something, right? All roads out of COVID led through Big Pharma, right? But it never crossed my mind that could have been an ego play. I want to be the guy that created the vaccine that saved everybody. And, Trump kind of fell into this too. Yeah. Like, oh, I did Operation Warp Speed. Yeah. I've been told it saved millions and millions. Now he's quiet on it. I think he realizes now he was lied to, which is one reason he's letting RFK Jr. do as much as he is. But it never dawned on me. Could have been an ego play.
It was primarily ego. So I'm not saying he's not vulnerable to money, but it's not the primary thing that makes him tick. And it's not the primary thing to academic kind of doctors. I mean, that's the world I came from. It's not the primary motivator. He certainly had his hand out, his palms out. He certainly was paid off. He certainly paid other people off. It's well documented, but he was primarily driven by a narcissistic world view. Like his personality was just, he needed to be the king, really. He's destroyed so many independent doctors along the way. It's wow. That.
I wonder if he lives in regret and shame, or if he's just walking around Italy going, nobody understands how great I am, how many lives I saved. Like his ego just cannot check itself at the door.
I think the latter. I don't think he can really process it. That's one of the things I've learned in the last few years is I don't think people who do bad really see themselves that way. Most people, I think they think they're doing well, but we have Fauci dead to rights. I mean, we've had him calling people that didn't want to take the shots, didn't want to be forced to take the shots. He says, we're going to basically force you and we'll see how quick you give up your ideological bull. Like he literally said that. We have the audio. Yeah. So I think humanity is plagued with sociopaths. So he's just one more.
Well, I remember when he was walking around the neighborhoods in Washington, D.C., and he was trying to put all this pressure on these black families to get the shot. And I was like, oh, this is so disgusting. I can't even watch this. I didn't even want to cover the story. It was so icky to me. Okay, Dr. Gold, you've got this incredible book out. You told us about one of the chapters, Selective Persecution. I know you got kind of railroaded in and lumped in with J6ers and stuff. What is the book about?
Yeah. So everybody knows me as a doctor, and I'm also a lawyer, and people sometimes forget that. And because of that, that's, I think, why I saw the tyranny so clearly in 2020. It was so obvious to me that they were just kind of, taking our freedoms away. They were telling you couldn't go to church, you couldn't sing in church. I mean, that was a crazy one. You couldn't, be outside in a public park, your kids, all this stuff. So I saw the tyranny right away. I was present on the Capitol grounds on January 6th because I had a government issue permit to speak. I was speaking all over the nation. I was talking on medical freedom topics. In fact, the day before I spoke in Washington, no problem. Of course, it's never a problem when I speak. I'm just talking about medical freedom. So January 6th, I also had a permit to speak that day. Now the day went obviously not as planned, and I was there with a permit, but I was there. Anyway, so our government was weaponized against people like me. And I think my story is very important because I was one of the few people who was there not to talk about the election, not to talk about, I thought it was obvious that the election was fraudulent, but I stuck to my lane. The election results were fraudulent. I stuck to my lane, which is medical freedom. And yet the government came after me very, very hard. And as a physician whistleblower and as an attorney who understood what was happening in real time, every chapter in the book goes over another way that the government can target an individual citizen and what that looks like. So I was targeted by Congress, FBI, DOJ, my professional boards, California Medical Board, the New York Bar. I was targeted, of course, by media. I was actually framed by the Department of Homeland Security for narcotics. I mean, I endured a violent SWAT team arrest. I went to prison, right? This is all in the book. I interviewed all the women in prison to find out what are these women in prison for, like what's their backstory. And what I found is there's a bit of an infrastructure of fascism in our country right now. The only reason we tipped so quickly into the tyrannical is because within our society right now, the average Joe is a little bit too complacent and compliant with tyrannical orders. And we've got that infrastructure now. We're seeing it right now, in 2025 with the judges who seem to think they're little mini kings. So every chapter goes over the tyranny that we're already living with. It's very, very eye-opening. I don't want people to think it's depressing. It's not depressing as much as it's shocking.
Yeah.
And it's very empowering because I really have won all of these battles. Now, it came at a price, but I really did win. And this is probably going to be the definitive work of my career. I spent more than 2 years doing it. And the other reason I did it is so that people like you and people listening will have all the receipts. Do you want the receipts? Do you want to have forever the proof of who said what when? How many people have gone back and said, we never said that the shots were safe and effective. We never said they would stop transmission. Oh, yes, you did. But 5 or 10 or 30 years from now, when you want to explain this to your grandchild, they're not going to believe you because it all have been scrubbed. So we've got all the proof. It's fantastic. It's like a historical record of weaponization of the government.
Oh, that's great. You just reminded me of something I heard in one of the new Star Wars shows on Disney Plus. I was watching it with my daughter, and there was a really curious line. The person said, tyranny is really hard to uphold, but our best tool is fear. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, good job, Disney writers. Like that I'm not a big fan of a lot of Disney stuff, but I was like, that is so true. Like, they're always trying to hold tyranny together. What is their best tool? Fear, just like driving fear at people.
So exactly. And I want to share with people that I don't think we're so vulnerable to tyranny in America from tyranny like in other nations, like religious tyranny or economic tyranny. I think we would survive that. I don't think that's really going to be where the attempts come from. It's definitely going to come back through the medical because people get so afraid over their health or their mother's health or their child's health that they succumb and they voluntarily give up their freedoms. I want to share with people that our founding fathers lived through many pandemics in their life. There was a famous influenza pandemic of the 13 colonies, like in 1730 or something. They knew about pandemics and they wrote the Constitution anyway. And we in 2020 just kind of went along with the abridgment of our constitutional rights. We can't do that. So this book will empower you, I think, to just be like, no, I'm not giving up my freedom. I'm not ever again saying I'm not going to church. Or what about unessential business? Who the heck is an non-essential business? Who gets to decide what's non-essential? That's very divisive amongst citizens. Like, are you better than me because you have an essential job? That is just unbelievable to me. And by the way, why is a Walgreens more essential than a mom and pop pharmacy? So it was very anti-middle class, anti-American, anti-Constitution, and I put those pieces together in this book. It's really, it's like, it's something you need to read. Everyone needs to read this. So that's my opinion.
Well, I'm excited for it to finally be out so people can get that. Okay, final question. I appreciate you sharing your time with us. Is there anything that you're still hoping to see from Trump or RFK Jr. that you've been traveling the country talking about that they haven't implemented yet?
For sure. I think that if Kennedy manages to pull off two things, he will change the face of our nation forever. One of them I know he's working on behind the scenes, which is to remove the liability shield that vaccine manufacturers enjoy. It's tricky. It's hard. You have to get all of Congress on board. But for sure, that hasn't left his mind. What I haven't been hearing about lately, but I think he'll get to, is all the pharmaceutical advertising that we do on television and on media. Only 2 nations in the world allow direct-to-consumer advertising of pharmaceutical products, America and New Zealand. I don't know why New Zealand does, but they're the only country. And we only started allowing it I believe it was in the 80s, it might have been in the 90s. And my father, who was a well-respected community physician, said to me, I was young, I think I was in medical school, he said that this will ruin medicine. Let me be clear. He said that advertising directly to consumers would ruin medicine. And I was so surprised at the strength of his words. He didn't say it would make it hard or difficult or weird. He was very emphatic that it would ruin medicine. I didn't understand that then. As an experienced doctor, I do. It changed everything. Patients will come in and they want what they want because they've heard it. And the way that we doctors get paid is to comply with what patients want. It's like this double-edged sword. If you essentially don't do what a patient wants, you really kind of have a problem in your professional life. And it's also much, much, much faster to simply write a prescription than actually talk to the patient and explain risks, benefits, and informed consent. For all of these reasons, doctors have essentially become pill pushers. And the single act of removing direct-to-consumer advertising will reverse that to a large degree. People will still be able to get a lot of information on the internet, but they're not going to be bombarded all day with diseases and wonder if they have them and ask their doctors to provide pills. We are just a pill-pushing profession at this point, and I think he can do a lot to reverse it, and I hope he does.
Yeah, I do too. The other thing that I noticed was once I realized how much of the mainstream media's income is from Big Pharma, I remember thinking they are never going to criticize what they do because they'll get that phone call. We will yank $100 million advertising spend if you guys ever do that again. Like, so the media can't really be honest. And that's a shame because honesty is what a good society is built on. But if they're controlled by, we might lose that ad spend, that's dishonest.
Right. Actually, a lot of people think that's why Tucker was fired from Fox, was because he had revealed or he had talked about Pfizer. It is too big for an individual media company to stop on its own. It's not possible. It has to be stopped at a higher level. There's no way Fox or MSNBC or CNN could ever talk truth about pharma. It's totally impossible. I think they're responsible for 60% or it's either 75% overall or 75% for television purchases. I mean, it's an overwhelming amount. It would be overwhelming if it was 10 or 20%, but it's either 60 or 75% of purchases for media are done by Big Pharma. How in the world can you expect them to report honestly? It's impossible.
Yeah.
And it's just, and you know, I still have the heart of a doctor. It's just bad for the patient. I see the television, I see the ads, and I think to myself, if I was a regular person, not a doctor, I would be wondering if I had all those diseases too.
Yeah.
I mean,
well, they do a good job. They bring in like the most persuasive filmmaker you can to make that 30 to 60 second ad. And then you watch it and you go, oh gosh, do I have that?
exactly.
Dr. Gold, I'm going to put a direct link down below to the book so that people can check it out. Where else can I push people if they want to follow you online?
Thank you so much. I'm always on Twitter, on X. I still say Twitter. And it's Dr. Simone Gold, Dr. Simone Gold. Please find me there. If you're so moved, please, our charity, America's Frontline Doctors, always needs public donations. A as in Apple, F as in Frank, LDS.org, AFLDS.org. We welcome donations. And just thank you so much for having me on. And It's been a really fun conversation.
Great. Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.